few weeks ago I made Tron-inspired miniature bases out of clear resin and transparent paint. I thought it made for a pretty sweet effect, and a bunch of people in the comments suggested other ways I could make this effect even better, so today let's try some of those. I've been modeling a lot of mech miniatures lately and have a ton of test prints kicking around on my desk, so I'm going to kit bash them together into a couple of miniatures and try out some of these effects. These have all been 3D printed in Anycubic Clear. Let's see how we do. The first suggestion I got was speed paint. I've actually never used these before, so this should be pretty interesting. Next, I'm pulling out Old Reliable, my set of inks. People wanted to see me use more than one color at a time, so let's give it a whirl. And finally, I saw a lot of people bring up fluorescent paint. These paints are all super thin and should work well as either an edge highlight or as a base coat. I usually jump into a project like this head first, but this time I grabbed a clear base and tried the paints before I put them on the miniature. After this first test, everything looked pretty promising, so let's get to assembling. I put together 3 miniatures to try out these paints. One for speed paints, one for inks, and one for a combination. Last time I dry brushed everything to bring out the small details and edges, and people suggested that I try using fluorescent paints for this instead, so I'm going to give that a whirl. I've got all my mechs put together here, so let's just jump straight into inks. This was the one that I was convinced was going to do the best out of all these tests. This stuff's really runny, and because I'm painting on clear and can't go back and clean up any mistakes, I've decided to base coat everything with one thick layer of my lightest color, this bright magenta here. And I can come back with my darker color and pull out some of these other details like the knee pads and blasters, and don't have to be super precise. Even with that amazing plan on how to go forward with this miniature, that was all easier said than done. Anytime you go over the edge even slightly like I have here, it's not like you can come back in with your base coat and clean it up. You're just kind of stuck with it, and that makes this whole process a bit of a struggle. Anyways, I get it all base coated and I come in with my fluorescence. I went fluorescent pink on a magenta ink. Say that 10 times fast. And it didn't read super well, so I figured, you know what? Let's throw the Hail Mary. I'm going bright jade. I think dramatic color shifts like this really help a miniature pop on the tabletop, and this guy is no exception. Dry brushing bright jade on this miniature makes it look like one of those old red-blue 3D images, and all of that on top of the clear magenta resin really makes it look like it's glowing from the inside. I finished this miniature off by painting in some metallics and called it done. This guy came out great. It's way punchier than the original bases, and if you're printing in clear, give inks a try. They're definitely worth the headache. Alright, on to the next one, and let me tell you, this did not pan out super well. I bet some of you can already tell. Instead of grabbing regular old speed paint, I have grabbed pastel speed paint, which unfortunately has white mixed in with it. It looks fine here, but once the paint dries, I've lost all transparency. Do I stop? No, I put on more paint. This is completely my fault, and I'm leaving it in just to say, make sure you check your labels before you paint. Luckily, I do have a third miniature ready to go, so let's push on. This time I'm going non-pastel speed paint, Caribbean Ocean, and my favorite magenta ink. I know this works from the first miniature, so let's get after it. Speaking of the first miniature, do you remember the part where I said painting with inks is a struggle? And using layering only alleviated this headache slightly? I decided to ignore all that for this last miniature and paint each of the details individually, hoping to keep the transparency as high as possible. I blocked in everything with magenta ink and then filled in the rest with Caribbean Ocean speed paint. I was hoping that if they touched in the cracks it would turn purple and maybe look like a wash effect. I'm not sure how well that panned out, but I do know that painting this steadily for this long is not something I excel at. This was a real challenge for me, that's for sure. And I'm sure you're all wondering, was all this steady painting worth it? Yeah, I would say so. This is one of the cooler miniatures I've painted in a while. Under bright lights it looks amazing, or just sitting on a tabletop it gives it this really cool sci-fi glow to it. Both of these guys came out great. I'm really glad I tried this, and thanks for all the suggestions in the comments. We're not going to talk about this guy. It's definitely a different way to paint and requires a bit more planning before you start, but I'd say it's worth it. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.